Welcome to Age, Pension, Super and Retirement. I'm your host Yvonne, and as always, this is information only and not personal advice. In today's episode, we will be looking at Centrelink indexation and deeming rate changes, and to do so, I'd like to welcome back Rebecca.
Thanks, Yvonne. Good to be here again.
Rebecca, when did these changes actually occur?
Okay, so 20th of March is when the Centrelink payments all get indexed, or not all of them, but most of them. So yeah, it's just gone 20th of March.
Perfect. And how much will the deeming rates increase?
Deeming is Centrelink's calculation of how much you are earning from your financial assets. We do have other episodes where we go into that in detail, because before you come across Centrelink, you sort of like, it doesn't make any sense. Deeming, what is that? But it's a calculation that Centrelink uses to figure out how much your super, bank savings, term deposits, all of that, how much they earn. The deeming rates had been frozen for a few years during COVID. They were very low, much lower than what people were actually earning on their investments. And we've just sort of coming out of that frozen period. And in September 2025, the deeming rates went up closer towards what actual cash rate is. And this time, March 2026, they have gone up by 0.5 percentage points. So the new deeming rates are 1.25% per annum for the first amount that you've got in savings and in financial assets, and then 3.25% per annum for anything above that threshold. It's still a fair bit below the official cash rate. And if you're investing your assets properly, you should be out earning that. You should be getting more than 3.25% on your money.
Thanks, Rebecca. I really agree. A lot of people, when they first come across this phrase deeming, they do find it quite abstract. So it is good to touch on that regularly. Can I just ask, you mentioned two different rates. What are these thresholds, or when do the different rates kick in?
So Centrelink has these two thresholds, so one for singles and one for couples. And they sort of go, well, the first bit of savings you've got, you probably aren't investing in a high risk thing. Most people would keep some money in a cash or a very safe kind of investment. So for singles, the first $64,200 is deemed at the lower rate, so that's at 1.25%. And for couples, it's the first $106,200. So that first amount is deemed to earn 1.25%, and then anything over that amount is deemed to earn the higher rate. Now, it's important to remember that it's not per account or per investment. So you can't have, $64,000 in 5 different accounts and think Centrelink thinks you're earning a small amount on each. They add up all of your financial assets. So maybe you've got $30,000 in a bank account and $200,000 in super. They add those amounts together and apply the first deeming rate, 1.25%, to the first $64,000 of that. So yeah, it's adding up all your amounts and applying those deeming rates to the total balance.
That's really helpful, Rebecca. Now, I know most of our listeners are interested in the age pension, but are there a few different payments that are affected with this indexation increase?
Yes. So yeah, age pension is the main one that we talk about in our group. But so age pension is a pension, and there's 2 other pensions that are paid at exactly the same rate. So that's the carer payment and disability support pension for people over 21 years of age. So those 3 payments are all indexed the same. That's the pensions. And then there's also other income support payments. So job seeker payment and parenting payment are also adjusted at this time. The student payments are indexed in January, but there's just a couple of categories of student payments that are linked to job seeker and parenting payment rather than the other youth payments. So there's a couple of categories of student payments that are indexed in March and September. But yeah, most of the student payments are indexed in January each year. Along with that, the low income card thresholds, they are indexed in March and September. That's another one. And that's the main things. Rent assistance also is indexed at this time. The ones that are particularly not indexed at this time are family tax benefit. Family tax benefit gets indexed in July. So people on family tax benefit, if you've got rent assistance as part of that, the rent assistance component will change, but the rest of it, the family tax benefit part A and B, stay the same. And carer allowance is indexed in January. So if you're on carer payment, the carer payment amount will change, but the carer allowance component, which is paid separately, that component doesn't change until next January.
That's really helpful, Rebecca. There's quite a lot of different scenarios there. Now, a lot of our listeners are interested in, I guess, how much the increase is or what the full age pension is going to. Maybe if you could just mention a couple of figures, whether it's for singles or couples, and I know there's a few categories that people might be interested to know exactly what those numbers are.
Yeah, sure. So this time the indexation is around 1.9%. I've had a couple of people say, hang on, the news said that inflation was at 3.8%, so why are our pensions only going up 1.9%? And you just got to remember that when they talk about inflation on the news, they're talking about a 12-month figure. They're saying the 12 months until this date is 3.8%. But pensions, because they're indexed twice a year, we're only looking at 6 months of inflation data to adjust that. So it just so happens that this time the 6 months is half of the 12 months. So yeah, the pensions are going up by 1.9%. And for singles, it's going up $22. The new rate of full pension will be $1,200.90. That includes the pension supplement and energy supplement that are paid as part of age pension. That's for singles. For couples, the amount is going up to $905.20 for each person. It's an increase of $16.70.
Fantastic, Rebecca. And for those that are renting, do we have a figure for the increase in rent assistance?
Yes. So for rent assistance, for singles who are living alone, the increase is $4, so it's going up to $219.40. For singles who are sharing with other people, that's going up to $146.27, so an increase of $2.67 per fortnight. For couples, the amount's going up by $3.80 per couple. So when there's a couple on rent assistance, if you're both on pension, you'll get half the amount each. You'll get $103.40 each. If you're a couple and only one of you is on pension, then the one person will get the whole amount of rent assistance. The other thing to remember with when rent assistance is indexed, all the numbers change. So with rent assistance, you've got the maximum rent assistance payable. So that's the amount that you get each fortnight. And there's also these thresholds, which are like the minimum rent threshold and the maximum rent threshold. For people who are paying a relatively small amount of rent, they actually have their rent assistance go down when it's indexed. Like say you're paying $200 a fortnight for rent. The government kind of goes, well, look, that's quite affordable for somebody on a pension, $200 a fortnight. And it's actually more affordable now with the total pension amount going up that you don't need as much rent assistance. So the minimum rent thresholds increase. So some people will see a small reduction in the amount of rent assistance they get, which is kind of their way of saying if your rent has stayed the same over this period, you're effectively better off and you don't need as much rent assistance. Because for most people paying rent, their rent goes up every year. It goes up with inflation. So yeah, that's just a little niche thing that I sometimes get questions about. I thought payment rates were going up. Why has my rent assistance gone down? So just thought I'd throw that in and explain that.
That's really interesting, Rebecca, and I, for one, did not know that. So thank you so much. Now, to get the full age pension, how much in assets could a single and a couple have? And I realise that there are probably a couple of different categories here, but a lot of people like to know the numbers.
Yes. So those thresholds haven't changed in March. So the limits for full pension, those are figures get indexed on the 1st of July each year. So they haven't changed. So they're the same as they were before. So for a single homeowner, the limit of assets for a full pension is $321,500. That's all assets outside of your home, because the home you live in doesn't count as an asset in most situations. And for couples, a homeowner couple, it's $481,500. So yeah, those amounts will change in July. They don't change yet. For non-homeowners, the thresholds are higher. For a non-homeowner, a single person can have $579,500 in assets and receive a full pension, and a couple, the amount is $739,500. So yeah, those figures will change in July. Now that's for the asset test. Now we've got to remember that Centrelink has an asset test and an income test. And most of the stuff you see online is all about the asset test, because for most people on pension, the asset test is what's going to reduce their payment. But it's not for everyone. So for some people, their amount of age pension is going to be affected by the income test as well. And there's a couple of different thresholds that happen here, because particularly for non-homeowners, if you've got a fair amount of money in super, that's a financial asset. And because of the deeming rates changing, if you're a single person, you don't own a home, and you've got $500,000 in super and maybe say $30,000 in other assets, on the asset test, you get full pension because you're under that $579,500 figure. But when they look at the income test, they're looking at that $500,000 in super and they're like, well, that's spitting off, a decent amount of income every year, every fortnight. And that income amount, the deemed income, is going to be more than the income threshold. So that person, even though their assets are below the limit, they're not going to be on full pension because their income is over the lower income threshold. It would be confusing, but we do have other episodes that we've talked about this in more detail. But with the deeming rates changing too, people who are impacted by the income test are going to see a bigger impact with the higher deeming rates. Basically, Centrelink suddenly, or the government, is saying, we now assume that you're earning more money from your financial assets than you were before. We're going to adjust your age pension down a bit to compensate for that. So we don't have to pay you quite as much pension because you're earning a reasonable amount from your financial assets.
That is a lot, Rebecca, and I guess one of the good things is we can listen to this episode more than once, because there are a lot of numbers to get our head around. Now, to get the part age pension, just even $1 or $10 of it, could you talk about any cut-off limits there?
Yes. So I said before that the lower asset thresholds don't change now, they change in July, and that's true. But because the maximum pension rate has increased, the higher asset threshold, or the asset limit, does increase. So scroll down here on this chart of all the limits. So we've got for pensioners, so for single homeowners, the asset cutoff has gone up by $7,500, and the new cutoff is $722,000. So if you've got less than that amount, you'll get a little bit of pension, and if you've got more than that, you get zero for pension. For couples, it's gone up $11,000, and the new limit is $1,085,000. Some people go, that's a lot of money, and it is. And a lot of people probably, they think, oh, if you've got $1 million, you don't need age pension, or how can you get age pension? But because of the way that the pension tapers down, a couple with $1 million in assets besides their home, they're not going to get a lot of pension, but they can get a few dollars. They can get a little bit. And yeah, like you said, there's some people who they're happy just getting a little bit of pension, $1, $10, $100 a fortnight, because it gets them in the system and it gets them a pension card. And for those people, if your pension's only $100 a fortnight, you're actually going to be getting more benefit from the pension card in discounts and concessions than you're getting in dollars of pension. So the pension card can be quite valuable for things like council rates, medication costs, utility bills, all those kinds of things. So that's the cutoff levels for homeowners. For non-homeowners, cutoff levels are higher. For singles, it's going up to $980,000. And for couples, the limit is going to be $1,343,000 in assets.
Wow, lots of helpful figures there again. Now, Rebecca, are there any other figures, and this has been very numbers heavy today, so we won't keep it much longer, but are there any other figures or scenarios that you think are worth mentioning here?
Yeah, so I've done a post in the Facebook group for people who've got financial assets enough that it's going to impact on the income test rather than the asset test. So there's a couple of charts in the group where I've shown like how much the deemed income is changing with the new rates. So a year ago, the asset thresholds were basically all that people needed to know about, especially homeowners, because the deemed income was so low that your assets didn't really impact, the financial assets didn't really impact on the income test. But now that's changing. So what we're seeing is that for a single homeowner who is on full pension in terms of assets, so they've got less than $321,500 in total assets, if the financial asset part is more than $214,000, the income that amount generates is going to be more than $218 per fortnight, the deemed income. So they're not going to be on full pension because of the income test. So those thresholds have changed. So before the 20th of March, the threshold for singles was effectively $252,000 in financial assets, because $252,000 was deemed to be earning $218 a fortnight. So anything over that amount was starting to reduce pension based on the income test. But with the higher deeming rates, we're now looking at $214,000 in financial assets is deemed to earn $218 a fortnight. So therefore, someone with $220, $230 in financial assets is going to not be on full pension anymore, because they're going to see a small reduction due to the income test. It's not a big reduction, right? So it's roughly $1 a fortnight for every $1,000 over the threshold. It's not a big impact, but it's something, and people will notice it, particularly so who are in that sort of zone of assets. Their pension won't go up by $22 a fortnight. It's going to go up by less than that. And for some people, it might even go down a little bit with the indexation. So you're going to need to draw more from your super or your bank account or whatever to be having the same level of income as before. So you're going to need to just adjust where you're drawing your money from for that. So that was, talking about singles and the financial asset thresholds. Now, these numbers are not published anywhere. They're not official numbers. It's just something I've worked out based on the maths of it. So working out if the income threshold is $218 per fortnight that amount is published officially, what amount of financial assets earns that much. So it's sort of just working backwards to get the numbers. And then for couples, that amount was around 436,000 up till the 20th of March, and the new amount is 369,000. So for couples, you've got between 369 and 436 in financial assets. You're not going to get the full increase in your pension. It's going to go up by a little bit, not the full amount, or it might even go down a bit depending on the exact amount of your financial assets. So yeah, again, you're going to need to look at your fortnightly budget. Where are you pulling money from? You might need to take more money from super to make up for the loss in pension. So some people think, oh, well, okay, if my pension's going to go down, can I do something about that? Can I reduce my assets to then get more pension? And you can, but it's not much of a payoff. You need to get rid of a lot of assets to see a reasonable increase in your fortnightly pension. So I would not recommend that. I would not recommend that unless you are going to spend the money anyway, like it's something that you would already planning to spend the money on or something that you actually need for your lifestyle.
You're amazing, Rebecca, saying that this isn't published anywhere, but you've worked that out. So on behalf of our listeners and Facebook group members, thank you so much. And I guess, yes, I didn't realise that there was such a shift, and I'd always assumed that most people were affected by the assets test. I guess if people work part-time when they get the age pension, that could be another example where the income limits are more
yes, definitely.
affected.
Yeah, so if you're working part-time and you've also got some money in super, so you know your work income, you're reporting that each fortnight, but in the background, Centrelink is assuming a rate of interest or earnings on your super. And yeah, that amount is going to change. So it might have been, like, let's say it was $300 a fortnight before, that might go up to $350 a fortnight. And then that's going to impact on the eventual rate of age pension you get. It's another reminder to update your assets, update your details if they've changed. So Centrelink is using numbers that they have on their system to calculate your assets. And sometimes people forget to tell Centrelink that things have changed. So, you might have spent some money on a holiday or, bought yourself a new lounge suite or whatever you've done, you've spent some money, and your bank account details on your Centrelink account might not reflect what you've actually got now. So it's a good opportunity to go into your Centrelink account, read through what details they have on your record, and if your actual figures are different, then go in and update it. So then Centrelink's got your actual numbers, the correct numbers, and they can pay you the proper amount. We've seen, like, sometimes people, they just don't update anything for years, and Centrelink still thinks they've got, $200,000 in a bank account, and over the years that's come down to $50,000. And but Centrelink doesn't know until you tell them. So yeah, you need to update that with Centrelink so they can pay you the right amount.
Such great information. Thank you so very much, Rebecca. For our international listeners wishing to join our Facebook group, the code word is yellow. And as always, this has been information only and not personal advice. Bye for now.